You're listening to Theater and College Hoops. I'm Subi. Alongside me is Taylor Dammel. We're brought to you by Dash Radio and the Barn Burner Podcast Network. Go subscribe on whichever device you use. I actually heard Nigel Williams-Goss, former point guard for Gonzaga. Last time he was there, he got them to a Final Four and a national title appearance. Nigel Williams-Goss, he sounds like a British guy. Doesn't sound like a college basketball point guard that's playing in the title game against Joel Berry.
Nigel Williams-Goss, also former Washington point guard as well.
Big Pacific Northwest guy.
Guy loves the state of Washington.
Fucking loves Washington.
Is he from Washington?
I'd have to assume so, right? That would actually be amazing. What if Nigel Williams?
He's from Oregon. He's from Oregon.
Wow. Did Oregon dirty then, huh? Yeah, so Pacific Northwest guy. It would be funny, though, if he was from somewhere in like the Midwest and he just said, well, I'm going to transfer, but I just love Washington so much.
Oh, yeah. Just great guy. Great guy.
NWG subscribes, so you should as well. He's got Northwest in his name, actually, now that I think about it. NW.
North by Northwest, Nigel Williams-Goss.
Yeah. Check out the website at thebarnburner.com. That's the-barnburner.com. And make sure to follow us on Twitter at CBB Theater. You should also follow me at Subi232 to find out where the Theat is. And make sure to follow Taylor at Taylor Dammel. We're sponsored by Blue Note, artfully crafted small batch bourbon, distilled in Memphis and honoring the Memphis Blues. Be noteworthy, Memphis. All right, we got no Shark today, so it's just me and Taylor. Taylor, I was in Dayton this past weekend. Took in a UD game, a Flyer game. They're very good, by the way. They are a top 15 team. Rothstein tweeted out a couple weeks ago, maybe a couple days ago, actually, that Dayton believes that this might be one of their best teams ever. And having seen them live, having seen Obi Toppin live, I might tend to agree with him. Now, the bar isn't that high for Dayton basketball in terms of how great some of their teams are. But the arena's sweet. It's kind of like, I mean, if I were to use a Rothsteinism for Dayton, what's a good one? I would just say like where it's like the United Nations. I don't know. Everyone comes there, right? Because they host all the play-in games. Like, so a million other schools have been there before, I feel like, including Dayton themselves. I don't know how they got a play-in game in their own arena, but the arena's sweet. They have their own they have their like little light show that they do pregame. The coolest part of the arena, though, is what they call the flight deck. It's just this bar atop the court, and it's like overlooking the court. It's pretty sweet. It's got a lot of drink varieties. And before I bring you in here, I want to also highlight that I was able to see Obi Toppin come down with one of the most majestic rebounds I've ever seen in my entire life. This guy makes the game look so smooth. Like he just glided in the air and it was almost like a cockback dunk, but instead of dunking it, he was getting a defensive rebound and he just like glided back down. And I swear I've never been a part of a crowd that has seen a rebound and kind of gasped at the same time. Like everyone just looked at each other. I think everyone in Dayton was saying to themselves, this is probably the best player that has ever come through this basketball program. And just a rebound made everyone catch their breath. But Dayton's a cool city, man. Cool arena.
Clearly you love it. Do you think people think higher of their program because they get to play in game every year? So they're like mentioned more often in like March Madness than a team of their kind of like of their actual success. And so they get, like there's a lot of name cachet that comes with Dayton, probably higher than what their success would suggest, maybe because they get to play in game. And they're, for 2 days in a row, we hear nothing but at Dayton's Arena. And I think that might give them a little bit of a boost when it comes to like where they sit from a national like notoriety. I mean, they've made one Elite Eight in the last 30 years. They've made 2 Sweet 16s in the last 40 years. It's not like they have a ton of success. So obviously they're on a pretty good streak here as of late over the last 10 years or so with Archie Miller, and then they took a few off. Now they back, so to speak, with Anthony Grant there. But yeah, Obi Toppin, he's got, off the top of my head, off the top end of my head, he's got to be. Yeah, thank you. He's got to be the best player that's ever come through Dayton, right?
I think so.
Right.
I can't really name. I mean, I think they have a player drafted from a couple of years ago, maybe.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'd have to put a lot more effort into going back through their history. But even on that team that went to the Elite Eight, that beat Ohio State there a couple of years ago, I'm really trying to think of who was on that team.
I just remember it being Archie as the coach because Archie and Sean could have met in the Final Four, right?
Yeah, and then what happened?
Well, yeah, I mean, they did what Millers do. But I'd agree with you in terms of the name cachet thing because I was talking to my brother-in-law's brother. He's a great guy. Love him. They're huge Dayton fans. They all went to UD. But he was trying to tell me because Jay Billis said it was the best atmosphere or best arena in college basketball that he was trying to have a hypothetical of, all right, well, what's better, Rupp Arena or UD? I'm like, Rupp. Like, I don't care what Jay Billis says in terms of like it might be the best arena, but in terms of atmosphere where I want to catch a game, I don't want to go to UD Stadium. I'd rather go to Rupp.
Yeah, I'm looking here and it says that the value of their basketball program specifically is actually higher than Florida, Texas, and Michigan. They have like the 23rd most valuable basketball program in the country. And I wonder how much of that has to do with the play-in games.
I have to think a lot, right?
I wonder what the revenue split is on something like that. But yeah, really interesting. I mean, it is a sneaky home court advantage and a sneaky basketball program, really. But because I think if you ask just kind of like a normal person, hey, what's a better basketball program? Like Xavier, Dayton. I think just not people who don't know anything you'd probably get like a 50-50 split where Xavier is a 10,000 times better basketball program. But just for some reason that Dayton, oh yeah, that's where they play the playing games. It elevates their status in people's minds, I think. So yeah, that's welcome to my TED Talk on Dayton Flyer, or our TED Talk on Dayton Flyers basketball here.
Yeah, it was a good time though. I really enjoyed their stadium. They know how to host.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. The bar situation sounds ideal.
Well, so that's the thing.
What do we have? Are we good on solid drink prices as well?
Oh yeah, we're in Ohio, baby.
Right.
Yeah,
that's what I was getting at. So, will you be returning to Dayton for another basketball game sometime?
I'd be down. Yeah, I'm more than open to doing that. Like I said, the flight deck. First of all, it has a cool name. Obviously, they're called the Flyers. You got to have some sort of neat name along with it. But we watched the entire game, or this entire second half from the flight deck, right? So we watched
a monster blowout, right?
Exactly. So
in
the first 15 minutes of the game, we were in our seats and it was a relatively competitive game. But then towards the end of the first half, Dayton started to pull away, and I think they were up 12 or 14 going into half. So I was like, fuck this. Let's just go up there, check out the flight deck, and get drunk. And that's exactly what we did. It's a very, very cool place to catch a ball game. So if you're ever in the, I think, southwest part of Ohio, I think that's southwest. I don't know. Like,
let's ask Nigel Williams-Goss. Maybe he can line us out here.
He's a Northwest guy, man. He's a Northwest guy, and I know my brother-in-law is going to be really upset when he listens to this, but I think it's in Southwest Ohio. Whatever. If you're ever in the Dayton area, go check out the stadium. I was also in Cincinnati, which is only about 45 minutes away from Dayton. Very underrated city, Cincinnati is. And actually, it's funny. I feel like they have this unspoken beef with the city of Charlotte. Reason being is because, well, Dayton and Charlotte, because Dayton apparently is the first in flight. And, North Carolina claims that they're first in flight.
That's even on their license plate.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, that's gospel then. I agree. I always say that, fuck it, North Carolina's first in flight. But apparently that's factually incorrect. But I'm gonna Preston Blake on that. But in addition to that, Cincinnati is called the Queen City, but so is Charlotte. So there's beef there between Southwest, I think, Ohio, and North Carolina.
This is incredible program right now. Let me go back for 1 second. Jim Paxson went to Dayton, so Jim Paxson is probably their best player of all time.
All right, hug for Jim Paxson.
Yeah,
People hate him now, though.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, you have actually spoken about Cincinnati to me multiple times. I have not been to that area of the country, Cleveland, Cincinnati, the Rust Belt, really much in my life. So I have to take your word for it. Can you give me a comparable city to Cincinnati? Is there a comparable like West Coast city to Cincinnati?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay.
It's its own guy. I don't know, maybe Seattle. Just in terms of like walking around and bar scene, things like that.
Okay.
Maybe. I guarantee you anyone from Ohio and or Seattle listening to this will probably be like, Cincinnati is nothing like Seattle. And I've only been to both places twice. So I don't know. Cincinnati might just be its own thing.
Okay. Gotcha. Cincinnati's one of those places too where you look at the population and you're like 300,000. That can't be true. Small city, but there's like 2 million people in the area. So that's kind of like Seattle. Seattle actually is only like listed at 500,000 or something like that. I think you're onto something here.
I might be. And the craziest part is how close Cincinnati is to Kentucky. I mean, you literally fly into Kentucky technically.
Right,
it's right there on the border. Yeah. So a lot of good times there in Dayton and Cincinnati. Thank you for hosting me, UD Arena. It was a fantastic experience. But let's dive in here to the show. Injuries headlining the past week, Taylor, and Cole Anthony and Myles Powell both out. It seems to be indefinitely. Myles Powell with a scary concussion. Cole Anthony out 4 to 6 weeks, I believe, with a knee injury. And so this is kind of like, since we're in the Christmas spirit, this is like Home Alone 3, this college basketball season right now, because nobody's any good, except for who I believe is Kansas. And I was going to say Ohio State, but they lost to Minnesota. But nobody's really any good, and we're missing our stars. Cole Anthony, Myles Powell, I had Big East Player of the Year. Cole Anthony, clearly the best player on North Carolina and potentially a top 5 pick in the draft. It's like Home Alone 3 because they were supposed to be our Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern, and they're out. So now we're getting some bums replacing them, and it stinks. So there's Cole Anthony, Myles Powell. Both of these injuries just really sucks for the game. Any thoughts on these two guys going down?
Yeah, you would say that they're two of the top probably 10 players in the country. North Carolina is screwed. They're done for. They're going to get bundled, I think, hopefully, as I say this. They're going to get bundled at Gonzaga. Kind of sucks a little bit, if you're Gonzaga or if you're a fan of college basketball, because here – North Carolinas of the world don't go play at little arenas in Spokane, Washington all that often. And this is now like the worst Carolina team of the last decade, even with Cole Anthony. And now without him, they're going to get smoked by Gonzaga, in my opinion. I can't wait to be wrong about this and get smoked myself on Twitter by the host of this program, I'm sure. But really, really unfortunate for Seton Hall too, because those two teams are kind of similar in a way where they're a lot of a one-man show carrying the load. And I don't, whatever that other guy's name for Seton Hall. Yeah, thank you. He's out for weeks too. I mean, that team is going to be really struggling in my estimation over the next couple of weeks. Yeah, I love the Home Alone 3 reference, and it really is kind of it's just, I don't really have a good way to describe this college basketball year so far. Weird. I hate to even use this word, but almost underwhelming in a way, because I was thinking today leading up to this program, last year we talked about college basketball almost all year, and because of Zion and that recruiting class. And it was, in my estimation, a really good college basketball season, whatever. Obviously, Zion held a lot of that, but there was more going on than just Zion, obviously. This year's recruiting class that came in There's not a ton of stars, not a ton of NBA. I mean, there's NBA talent, but not like surefire number one picks and things like that. I don't like to use underwhelming, especially as the co-host of a college basketball podcast, but there hasn't been a lot to really hang our hat on to say like, oh, this has been awesome or this matchup is going to be awesome. There have been awesome matchups, but even that Michigan-Oregon game this last weekend, which was an awesome game, that's already Michigan. It's already their third loss of the year. That was kind of the story for the first couple of weeks. It's, oh man, Michigan, they're super dope. They came in and beat everybody, and now they've lost 3 times since then. And so a little underwhelming as, say, an Arizona fan as well, losing both of our really big games that we've had this year, albeit in close fashion, in entertaining games. I think this is a type of season so far that it's not going to make a lot of national people turn their heads, especially with the NFL being so good this year and so entertaining this year, especially at the top of the NFC and AFC. But this is definitely that classic type of year where people are going to wake up on February 5th and go, oh, so that's the number one basketball team in the country. Cool. Here, let's start on. Whereas last year, like you said, you had Zion leading even like Sunday broadcasts of SportsCenter during the NFL season.
Zion drew Barack Obama. Yeah, I mean, I'm completely with you in the sense that I do believe it is an underwhelming type of season. I'm okay with that. And the thing that sucks the most about it is, I mean, I'll still watch these games obviously because we love it.
Oh yeah, right.
But there's always these NBA hardos, right? These NBA fans that are just like, y'all watch this sport? You guys watch this in lieu of the NBA? It's like, honestly, yeah, this is obviously we know it's a worse product, but that's the fun of it. But it's so bad.
They're like gatekeeping basketball, Yeah. Continue on though.
No, I mean I agree. It's been very tepid, lukewarm. And we don't have a star that we can. There's no one that's like appointment television. That was actually Miles Powell. And we thought we may have had that with Tyrese Maxey after his performance in MSG. And that might have been us just jumping the gun, which is what we obviously love to do. But there's just not appointment television like there was last year.
I mean, look at Gonzaga as a perfect example of this. I bet you not one person, even a sports person in the country, can name someone outside of Killian Tilly on Gonzaga. They're the number 2 team in the country. I mean, there aren't stars, and plus you can't pronounce half their fucking names either, which is part of the problem. Martinez Arlauskas, Pavel Zakharov, Philippe. I do like my man Philippe Petrusev, but yeah, and you look at even Kansas. Azubuike's a star, but is he? He's a star in our minds.
Basketball star.
Yeah, right. Sure. Jordan Nwora is a star, but he's not bringing eyes to anybody. The Wessons on Ohio State, they're not bringing anybody. Duke doesn't really have anybody you're like, oh, that's a surefire NBA player I want on my team. I mean, their best player, quote unquote, best player or most important player is someone who I don't even think is good anyway, Trey Jones. And so I wonder someone's gonna come to the forefront. I think because someone has to go on a run. Maybe it's Garza. Maybe Luka Garza sweeps the nation. But what it really is going to end up being is, and this is what's going to be the payoff to this kind of mediocre start to the season is, this should mean that the tournament is wide the fuck open, which means that like every game should be sick, and someone like from an Arkansas or one of those teams that's like a bubble team should be able to sweep through and become a star in March Madness. We just really are not going to be able to pick that person out at this point because there's just so much of, I guess, even playing field right now.
Yeah, I think right now we are Dufresning, which is something I never thought we'd say during the season. Dufresning is for crawling through the shit of the summer. But right now we're just trying to get through to the new year, to conference play, when there's going to be rivalry games at stake, and then on to conference tournaments. And then, of course, as you had mentioned, the wide open NCAA tournament, which, watch, like, the Blue Bloods are going to rise to the top yet again. But I do think that Kansas has arrived. Kansas is the best team in the country right now. But losing Cole Anthony, losing Miles Powell is a killer. And it's not just short-term injuries where we can say, oh, they'll be back in a week or so. They're only going to miss a couple games. These guys, I don't know when Miles Powell is going to be back. Apparently he said, what did he say at practice? They were playing Rutgers. And he said at practice, he goes, why are we practicing at Rutgers? That's fucked up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like an NFL CTE type injury, man, not college basketball. And then you got Cole Anthony.
That's crazy.
That's bad. That's so bad. And then you got Cole Anthony, who is trying his darndest to carry a blue blood on his back. And North Carolina, they might be in jeopardy of even missing the tournament, which is kind of sacrilegious and insane to say, but they just might.
No, they seriously could. They are, they don't have anybody else to carry that team at all. There's going to be, I mean, they can't go through the, Virginia's, Dukes, Louisville, Florida States of the world right now, because those teams are all way more talented.
They can't even get through a Wofford at home.
No shit. The only way that they're going to survive is that they don't play the current 4 best teams in the ACC right now until February.
I think you had mentioned that last episode too.
Right. So that is going to be their only saving grace in this situation. But I really don't. I think if you wanted to make a blunt statement and say, I straight up don't think North Carolina is going to make the tournament, I wouldn't argue against that at this point.
I'm going to hold off on saying that because of Roy and because of their name. I think if they only lose, let's say 11, 12 games, they'll still get in. And let's say if they string together a couple games in the ACC tournament, they'll still get in on name alone, and Cole Anthony will be back, and that obviously depends on if he wants to play. But I'm not yet ready to say that Carolina is going to be out, but they're certainly in jeopardy of doing that. They're going to lose tonight, last night.
Yeah, I mean, Leaky Black isn't leading this team to the tournament. Yeah, I mean, that's just
leading them in the all-team name, though.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's the only kind of saving grace of Cole Anthony in the sense that, like, he can straight up win a game on his own. So if they are a bubble type of team and they need 2 wins in the ACC tournament, like, Cole Anthony can beat Boston College on his own. Like, that's not a problem, And so if it's almost like who I'm trying to think of. It's almost like a Kemba Walker situation is what it'll end up being. When Kemba Walker and UConn won the national championship, they were not in the tournament
right
leading up to the Big East tournament. And he went through and literally carried the team to a national championship. So am I saying that Cole Anthony is going to do that? No, but I am saying that he has the ability that if they're in that position, they can do that. So I would still say that they're in danger of missing the tournament, but at least if Cole Anthony comes back, you make a good point. I was going to bring this up, though. So if you're Cole Anthony, you're a surefire top 5 pick in the draft right now. It's kind of same thing with Wiseman, and I'll talk about Wiseman here in a second. What 6 weeks is what? We're middle of December, so February 1st. That's a month and a half left in the college basketball season at that point. Do you risk your pro, especially because your dad was an NBA player, so he knows the game and how to play the game, and I'm talking about the game like outside of the court, like how to get yourself into the NBA. Do you even come back?
If I'm Cole Anthony, I wouldn't, strictly because of the injury. I think his situation is different than Wiseman's. I actually think this lines up perfectly for Wiseman because he's not hurt. And if you told James, you don't have to go a full season, you can kind of just use the first half of 2020 as a dress rehearsal and get ready for the draft, I think he'd take that. So Wiseman's not hurt. I would come back if I was James Wiseman. If I were Cole Anthony, no. And I said this with Zion last year, and people thought I was an idiot, but I was like, I wouldn't come back if I was Zion after blowing through my shoe. Obviously, Zion's not – I mean, he's built differently. Zion wanted to come back. He loves Duke. He loves Coach
Built
K.
different.
Yeah, maybe to a fault, honestly, physically. But he came back, and that's fine too. I said basically I don't care either way, but if it were me and I was Zion with so much riding on this, I wouldn't come back. And him coming back, it didn't really hurt him. He's done well. But Cole Anthony, again, it's the same as Zion last year. I'd sit out with a knee injury, especially as a point guard.
Right.
Just take your draft value. But Wiseman, I'd actually come back.
So turning to James Wiseman here for a second, we haven't talked about him in a couple of weeks. And Memphis is treading water and actually trending up even right now without.
They're doing well.
Wiseman. Yeah, they only have
huge
one
win on the road.
They just beat Tennessee on the road. So I think any doubts that we had about them being good outside of James Wiseman are gone, in my opinion. But to echo back to our first thing we were talking about the season needing a star, James Wiseman coming back the first week, or when is it the first week of January, is going to be the ideal situation for him to like save the college basketball season in a way. He's going to come back right as the NFL is turning down, and right as you get through kind of those dog days of the NBA season, where we're just kind of treading water until the All-Star break, and he can blast back onto the scene and kind of lead Memphis to the tournament. And I think he could be the star that we need to like hang our hat on here in the college basketball season. I think his timing of when he's coming back will actually work in his favor from a national notoriety situation, because I think if none of the NCAA stuff would have happened, half the people in the country wouldn't even know who James Wiseman is. Now, when they come back, they're going to say, oh, the NCAA guy is back. We might need to tune in and see if he was actually good, whatever. And so I think Wiseman coming back in less than a month from now will actually be kind of the savior of our national notoriety for college basketball this year.
Please come save us, James. I need someone to watch, like, as an individual. I'll obviously watch these teams, but I need someone that I can just pinpoint and watch. I want someone to dominate a game, and that actually might be Garza right now. He just doesn't have the name, the name appeal. He doesn't have the sex appeal with those eyebrows. He also doesn't have. He plays for Iowa. Garza though is dominating basketball games. He's just averaging a double-double, dropping 40+ points. That might be our guy, but he doesn't put asses in the seats.
I'm going to bring this up again, and I'm about to the point where I'm going to die on this hill. Iowa is so criminally underrated this year. It's unbelievable. They're still not ranked.
And they beat the absolute piss out of Iowa State on the road.
And Minnesota. Game. Their only losses still are what did they lose to DePaul earlier this year? There's DePaul, San Diego State, and Michigan.
SDSU is undefeated too.
Yeah, and they're still not ranked. But you've got teams like, Texas Tech, albeit they were in the Final Four last year. They have 3 losses this year. Michigan State's got 3 losses. Michigan's got 3 losses. Obviously have some good wins. But the fact that even North Carolina has got more votes for them than Iowa this week is just ridiculous to me, because Iowa is going to be like a 5 seed in the tournament right now, and that is 100% a team that I would take to like the Elite 8 at this point, depending on their matchup, because I think they're that good, and I think Garza is that good, and I think it's ridiculous that it really goes to show, as we continually gripe on college basketball writers, it really goes to show that nobody's watching these games. If you think Iowa is the 30th best team in the country in a year where nobody is good, there are certainly not 29 better teams than Iowa right now, in my estimation.
Theater and College Hoops is now officially a Iowa supporting podcast. I will be tweeting it. Breaking news. This is a Garza. Yeah, this is a Garza podcast. This is an Iowa Hawkeyes podcast. This is a Fran McCaffrey podcast. Get these boys ranked, and we're going to start the petition. All right, we will lead the drive, and alongside Garza's play, we'll get Iowa ranked. We'll get us ranked.
Can you? Yeah, us. Thank you. Can we change the name of the podcast to like Theater and Corn Basketball? We don't have to change like the acronym, but I think Corn
Theater
Basketball.
Corn
yeah, that's fine.
Sure.
Yeah. Awesome. This is
until
great.
They're ranked. We'll change it to Theater and Corn Hoops.
I should have like cut my mustache back in again and been like, I'm only growing this back until Iowa is in the top 25. Damn it.
Yeah. All right. So perfect. After we tape this, I will change the Twitter handle to Theater and Corn Hoops, and that will be the handle until they're ranked. This is a hill. What did they? What is the old saying? The old adage.
I'm willing to die on this hill. Yeah.
Yeah. We're Preston Blaking for Iowa, but also, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. This is Garza's country right now. So look for that moving forward.
It also doesn't hurt or help that Jordan Bohannon is going to be out for the rest of the year.
Boss move. Oh, that's also what we should talk about real quick. How did the Shark's not here to defend himself, but he didn't like the move from Jordan Bohannon to sign his sneakers and leave it on the court at Iowa State. And he had likened it to Gabe York doing that to ASU. And I'm like, well, Gabe York, I think, owned ASU during his tenure. It feels as if Iowa, I don't know the exact stats or the win-loss record during Jordan Bohannon's time, but it feels like Iowa has owned Iowa State. And
3-1.
3-1. So yeah. I love the move, signing the shoe, leaving it in your rival's arena. And I also feel like Bohannon knew that this was probably his last game before he was done for the season. So why not just go out like this? Hat tip to Jordan Bohannon.
Yeah, I can't wait to get on Fanatics after this and order like a Hawkeyes hat, shirt. There's a lot of Hawkeyes here in Phoenix for sure. Sat next to George Kittle's wife's uncle on the plane a couple weeks ago. He's a Hawkeye, and I love George Kittle. So maybe and I am a Packer fan. Isn't everyone in Iowa a Packer fan pretty much? Border state situation. Is this heaven, Subi?
Well, once Arizona flames
Iowa.
out,
Could you finish the idiom for me there? Come on, is this heaven, Subi? No, it's Iowa. I couldn't love this podcast anymore.
Well, hold on. Idiom, I think, is using like or as, isn't it?
Not idiom. Whatever the phrase.
Well, we don't want to contaminate the brains of the theater goers, but
okay, true.
This is clearly an Iowa podcast moving forward. Let's talk Arizona losing to Gonzaga. These goddamn assholes. I'm glad I didn't get bought in just yet. So the Baylor game a couple of weeks ago, I said, all right, this is cause for concern. And then don't let the final score play tricks on you. This was kind of a beatdown, especially in the second half. They were good in the first half. Second half, they let it get away from them. I will pause and say that Gonzaga is a really good fucking team. Number 2 in the country, clearly the best team in the West Coast. But Nico Mannion, not clearly his worst performance of the year. He was seen shooting some shots, getting some shots up post game. But in the 2 biggest games of the year, Chase Jeter lays an egg, and then Nico Mannion lays an egg. At what point do we say, like, it's not just anomalies where some of our better players or our starters don't play well, and we say, okay, they can't get production against top 15, top 2 teams?
Yeah, it's I am generally the grand optimist when it comes to sports and Arizona basketball, even more specifically. I think we'll get our answer to that question in 2 games from now, when Arizona goes on the road to Oregon, and kind of like a Pac-12 decider almost in the month of January or the early part of January. And that will obviously have a great point guard matchup with Sharks boy Peyton Pritchard and our boy Nico Mannion. Now, it doesn't concern me. Well, it concerns me that Chase Jeter can't rebound a basketball and also is the most hesitant big man around the rim in the history of the sport. But we know that. I think what concerns me a little bit more is Nico Mannion's ability or inability to make shots in the 2 biggest games. Because the only 2 bad games he's had this year are Baylor and Gonzaga. Now, Baylor is generally known as a pretty good defensive team, although this year they're a little more offensively inclined than normal. Gonzaga is not really known as a defensive team, and the score would indicate that from last week, 84-80. It's a pretty high-scoring affair. It was pretty funny, though, that small comeback at the end, because I was at a holiday party with friend of the program, Danny Dubois, the Dubes himself, on his new 86-inch TV. That thing is sweet. him and Mary were hosting a nice little holiday function, and we had the Arizona game on, and a couple of Arizona people at the party, but everyone else was ASU or UCLA or whatever, so everybody's hating. This guy had bet with his bookie a couple $100 on the Arizona game, and when Gonzaga went up, they went up 16 at one point, I believe, and with about 4 minutes left, and his bookie paid him out already on Venmo. And so when Nico Mannion hits that three to push it to like a 2-point lead, I was yelling. I'm like, dude, get back in here. And he turns around and he's like, what is going on? But I don't know if I would say, I think that game is more of an indication of how good Gonzaga is than maybe how bad Arizona is, because I think Arizona is still going to end up being a top 4 seed. I don't think they're going to be a top 2 seed. I think they're going to be like a top 4 seed come tournament time. And the difference between a team like Arizona and Oregon at this point is, I think, opportunity. Because Oregon at this point is a better team than Arizona. I think that goes without saying. But what Oregon really gave itself this year is Oregon has 2 similar losses to this Baylor and to the Baylors and Gonzagas of the world. The problem is they also played like 3 other teams that were like that they picked up those type of wins, just like this Michigan win. So they have the opportunity, or their ceiling when it comes to like tournament seeding. They don't even have to win the Pac-12 at this point to get a top 2 seed in the tournament, in my opinion, because you're going to look back at their non-con schedule and go, oh, okay, yeah, they played a lot of good. Arizona's ceiling. Yeah, Arizona's ceiling isn't going to be that high. Arizona's going to have to be like a 16-2 record in the Pac-12 to get that type of recognition, and they're not going to go 16-2 in the Pac-12. So I would say I'm guessing your thoughts are pretty similar on being a little more concerned about Nico Mannion rather than Chase Jeter.
I'm just concerned about Mannion's back, because ever since that injury, which took place before the Baylor game, he's kind of stunk. So I'm hoping that he can shake off that injury. But I understand what you're saying about opportunity, but these are 2 huge opportunities for Arizona. I think Baylor was completely beatable. They should have beat Baylor.
100%.
I'm okay with them losing to Gonzaga because of how good Gonzaga is, but they kind of got ran in the second half, and that's what pissed me off. That's what when you don't really show fight in front of your home crowd against a West Coast opponent who, where you have a chance to pick up this big win. And the games are only going to get more difficult in the Pac-12. On the road to Oregon, I mean, I think that's a far more difficult place to play than Baylor is.
Oh,
they're
yeah.
a better team than Baylor.
Oh, yeah.
So and Oregon's now clicking on all cylinders, especially after that win against Michigan on the road. So I'm just a little concerned right now about Arizona, and you want them to be able to take care of business there used to be a 4-year stretch where Arizona took care of business at home. And now Gonzaga's kind of got their number. Oregon definitely has their number. So I'm just a little concerned about how they're going to perform moving forward. And that's why I was a little hesitant to jump on their bandwagon.
I am completely understanding of that for sure. What gives me a little solace in all of this is that, and we've talked about this on this program before, and Arizona, for some reason, cannot play from the under 8 timeout in the second half to the under 4 timeout in the second half. That's exactly when that 16-0 run that Gonzaga went on. And then Arizona scores like 20 points in the last 4 minutes of the game. Same exact thing happened at Baylor, although Baylor started off really hot in that game. Arizona kind of came all the way back and then gave up the lead again in that 8-minute to 4-minute stretch. And I wonder, I'm not as good as, say, maybe a college basketball coach at figuring out like the analytics behind that or the reason behind that, but that's clearly a problem. And I don't quite understand it, because the rest of the game, the team looks as good as every other team in the country until the under 8 timeout hits. And then they look completely lost for 4 minutes. And then they look again like a really good team, and after the under, which is good, I guess at least they know how to
Showed some sort of
yeah,
pulse. Yeah.
like there is fight there. I just don't quite understand. I don't know if there is a reason for it, but that's clearly the problem this team is having right now. It's just that 4-minute window, give or take, that is kind of blowing these games for them. And I'm not saying like blowing. Obviously, they lost to 2 ranked teams, but same thing happened in that Wake Forest game. Same thing happened in that Pepperdine game. And same thing happened in that South Dakota State game. Those are the other close games that this team has played this year, and the same exact thing happened in all of those games.
I think my biggest issue right now with Arizona is also just Arizona Twitter. Like I was seeing some tweets being like, well, they lost by a couple to the number 2 ranked team of the country. It's like, no. If you want to be considered a national title contender, a Final Four contender, you win those games. You have to, or at least one of those games. You can't drop every single one of them, right? So, and I'm not asking a team to win every single one of them either. It's not like Michigan's done that. It's not like Oregon's done that. But you got to get one of these upcoming, and so that's why it's just I kind of wish that they had ripped the Band-Aid off and just gotten one of these under their belt before conference play, because now it's only going to get tougher, like I had mentioned, and they have to start winning these games.
Well, yeah, the hope was at least get the split here. So if you got the split with Oregon during the conference play, it all would be good. You would say, okay, this is a really good team. Ceiling is high, so on and so forth. Now Arizona almost has to beat Oregon twice to get a really not good seed for the tournament. And I just do not anticipate that happening. I cannot see this team as it currently stands beating, and I'm not saying Oregon's like the end all be all best team in the country. They could be given the nature of this college basketball season so far. But Arizona pretty much has to win both of those games to A, win the Pac-12, which we knew, but B, kind of garner some national notoriety and a really good seed, because at this point the team in a season where everybody is beatable, this team doesn't look any better than a 4th seed, and that's pretty much where they're sitting right now, 15th, 16th in the country, which is fine. Which is fine. We have a kind of Nico Mannion isn't as good as Cole Anthony, going back to that discussion, but Nico is a guy that could take over a game and win a couple games in the tournament or in the conference tournament. So, this team obviously isn't in danger of like missing the tournament or any of that bullshit. They're a really, really good team in a season that has a lot of no great teams, has a lot of good teams. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what really it's going to keep us afloat, though, is that sure, are there teams that are better than us or better than Arizona? Yes. How many are there really? Not very many, because there's just no great teams in college basketball as a whole. It's just a little unfortunate for us as Arizona fans that one of those teams that clearly is better than Arizona is Oregon.
And also Gonzaga, actually, I would say too.
Yeah. Where would you rate now? UCLA's been down for years. ASU's never been good at basketball. Where would you rate Gonzaga as Arizona's rival? They're not their number 1 rival. It's always going to be UCLA.
Yeah, I feel like it's still UCLA, but number 2. I mean, Gonzaga's gotten to a Final Four more recently, played in a title game more recently, beaten us more recently. Gonzaga's the best team on the West Coast. And so that's one thing that Arizona's always prided itself on, either them or UCLA. And so I don't know if UCLA or Gonzaga ever play each other, but Arizona should consider those two for sure as their rival. Nostalgia-wise, UCLA, but in terms of success, it's Gonzaga, because the first half of this decade, it was Arizona by going to those Elite Eights back-to-back. Second half of the decade, it was run by Mark Few and Gonzaga. So it's a very interesting rivalry right there. Arizona, like you had mentioned, clearly not in jeopardy of missing the tournament. This team technically isn't in jeopardy anymore of missing the tournament. They're fucking done. They're completely dead, buried. And that's Providence.
Oh, my God.
Lost by 30 plus to Florida. And I never really expected them to actually beat Florida, but they were in Brooklyn. So that's more of a home game for them than it is Florida. They're in Brooklyn, and they just don't even show up, man. They don't even show up. And apparently a fan basically said, "This sucks, Cooley," or "You guys
This is embarrassing.
This is embarrassing." And Cooley was like, "Word. Yeah, I agree." But I mean, while I appreciate the self-awareness there by Cooley, it's like, dude, do your job. Like, it's not enough for you to just agree. You got to change it somehow. And this team's quit. You got to think that at 500 again, 6-6, 12 games into the season, losing by 30 plus to a Florida team that's actually struggled. Both of these guys came into the season with some expectations. Florida, bigger expectations, but it's not like Florida has been world beaters. They kind of stink too.
Yeah.
And Providence didn't show any sort of heart or pulse. And I'm mad because they're doing my guy, the Providence Crier, dirty. Not because of his Crier prophecy, which was garbage to begin with. I love you, Crier, but that was terrible. But because he's such a diehard fan and Providence has a great fan base, and they're just not even showing up at all this year, and they're not going to make the tournament.
No, they're just god awful. I mean, there was not a lot of basketball on night before last there, and at really the first couple days of this week. And you're trying to watch that game, which should have been leading into the season. It wasn't one of the best games of the season by any means, but you would have looked at that and been like, oh, okay, yeah, that'll be a pretty fun matchup. A couple, top 10, top 25 teams. And they're just tragically bad. I don't particularly understand why, but they are just horrific. I
think for Florida, you could chalk it up to chemistry issues, and I also don't think Mike White is that great of a coach. Providence, right. I just don't think they're trying, man.
Yeah,
I just think they've given up.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. Is you watch this team and you're like, there's nothing to like about this team at all.
What did they shoot from three last night? 5%, I think.
Yeah, right. That was a very Arizona showing of them. I feel bad because Providence really had. They weren't they weren't favorites to go to a Final Four or Elite Eight or anything like that. But you could say, oh yeah, good year ahead for Providence. Ed Cooley, good coach, going to lead them back again. But this kind of goes back to our discussion episode or two ago. Ed Cooley's got to be laying awake at night, being like, "What the fuck did I do? What an idiot! I had the opportunity to take one of the best jobs in the country, but I stayed here, and now." He's not on the hot seat or anything like that. Every coach is allowed a down year or two or whatever. But now he just puts more pressure that they have to be good next year. Because if you have 2 bad years in a row at a quote unquote basketball school like Providence, because they got nothing else, so it's too bad for Providence fans and Ed Cooley. I like Providence. I like when Providence is good. I like, that conference obviously is a conference that I like a lot. It's kind of underwhelmed from what our original thoughts were on the year as a whole, because we had Providence slotted in there as a team to watch, and they obviously haven't performed, and the conference is kind of, I don't want to say the conference is down, but they certainly haven't performed as well as I anticipated. So definitely a hug for Providence fans out there, because it's been a rough one, and I don't anticipate it getting any better.
Not this year, at least. No,
they're
done this year.
No, because that team is just going through. It's not even January 1st, and that team is already going through the motions, just not doing a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah, going to be a long season up there in Providence, so they're dead, unfortunately. But let's take a look at a game this upcoming weekend. Want to get your prediction? Ohio State versus Kentucky. Big tilt, 2 of the better teams in the country. After Kentucky's kind of been lying under the radar after their Evansville loss at home. All they've done really since then is take care of business. They're in the top 10, and they still have their explosiveness in Tyrese Maxey versus the methodical and senior laden or veteran laden team in Ohio State with the Wesson brothers. Who you got in this game? Ohio State versus Kentucky.
Couple 3-4 weeks ago, I would have picked Kentucky. Ohio State came off that loss. When is that game, on Saturday?
I think so, yeah.
Ohio State came off that, is going to come off a loss. They did just win against the Southeast Missouri Central Northwest Nigel Williams Goss Academy, whatever. I think I'm going to go with Kentucky simply because of what you were saying, that they kind of just been laying under the radar. Nobody's been talking about them. I think this is where they kind of propel themselves back up. That's a prime time Saturday game from Vegas. I think that's when and kind of propel themselves back into the conversation as the best team in the country. And I hate how this basketball season has gone in a way where like Kentucky, who lost to Evansville and should have fallen so far, but everybody else just sucks too. So they could lose to Evansville and still make it back to potentially the number one team in the country, like before the new year. That's wild that that could happen. And if they win this game, it's a complete possibility, really. Obviously it would take a couple other teams losing ahead of them, but they probably move up to number 3 if they win this game.
Yeah.
And what a strange story that is, that a team could lose to a know-nothing Evansville team at home and still make it back to the top 3 in the country before the new year.
It's pretty crazy, but I'm going to take Kentucky as well, actually, because this is Cal's dojo. This is his cathedral. This is his temple, his place of worship. This is what Cal does. Late December games, neutral court against, I don't want to say Ohio State's an inferior opponent, but when he's not going up against blue bloods like Kentucky, or excuse me, like Carolina or Duke, he can beat a good Ohio State team. And this is where he kind of puts his mark back on college basketball and says, I'm back, bitches. I actually didn't go anywhere this year, but you had all kind of written us off. So I'm going to go with Kentucky here over Ohio State. I believe that's in Vegas, right?
Yes, it is.
The big man matchup is going to be fun. Wesson versus Nick Richards. I'm going to be looking forward to that quite a bit, but I'm going to take Kentucky.
It's been strange, and I've seen a couple of the talking heads tweet about this year, and I don't know, maybe we'll get your thoughts on it. Doesn't the cadence of when the games have come this year seem really strange? I mean, I'm trying.
What do you mean about that?
Like on Monday, there was one Division I basketball game going on, not top 25. Division I basketball, one game in the whole country was going on. There's 351, I think, college basketball teams in the country. And why we don't have, it seems like I just remember as a monster college basketball fan that every single night I was able to at least find like a Presbyterian Wofford game at like 11 p.m. It's weird that we will go days at a time without a top 25 team playing, any top 25 team playing. Now, obviously, the year has been kind of strange where that Florida Providence game, for example, going into the season, you would have said, oh, yeah, that's easily a top 25 matchup. It's not, but to me, it's just been weird. And, let me plug the Warm Up Daily newsletter, the daily newsletter that I do for sports every day. We have a what to watch section, and I go and I roam around to find what's going on in each sport and what's on TV. And I'll go into college basketball sometime to type out what's on tonight. And there's nothing. There's just nothing. I maybe it's because I do this newsletter now that I'm noticing this more, but I just think it's weird that we don't have, it seems like we go days and days at a time without having like a decent college basketball matchup.
Maybe that's why we think this year sucks. And we're just not enjoying this year so far.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems like I can't find a good game as easily as previously. But that could be completely all me. But I have seen a couple people, the talking heads of the world, tweet about this. So it wasn't just my thought alone here. Let's take Friday, for example. The only top 25 matchup on a Friday night in December is winless Central Connecticut at Penn State. On a Friday night. Nothing. There's no football on. There's no NBA on. And we only have one, and that's on Big Ten Network. If you want to watch that Central Connecticut matchup against Penn State, and that's just strange to me because that should be like a strong college basketball night,
right? But with nothing else going on. Hey, hug for Penn State, by the way. Ranked.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're solid. I don't know. It just seems strange to me. Maybe someone else out there has noticed this and could tweet at us and let me know if I'm completely off base in this. But I mean, I'm looking at that and thinking to myself, there's got to be more going on in the world than just that. Obviously, the next week is not going to be a good example of that because you got Christmas and the New Year after that and stuff. So maybe we just need to get into conference play for the schedules to really kind of round out I'm looking at kind of just looking ahead here. Yeah, even the Monday and Tuesday after New Year, there's not a ranked team. There's not a ranked team playing that night. There's not a ranked team playing on. I don't know. I just don't get it. There's not a ranked team playing Wednesday. There's not a ranked team playing Friday. It's really strange. It just seems like there's where are these? They got to be playing at some point somewhere. So
maybe we'll just get backloaded. We're gonna have a shitload towards the second half.
Yeah, then that's the problem. Then we're gonna have a Saturday where
everything's
14
happening.
games on at the same time, and it's all ranked matchups.
Well, that's why we put the reps in, though. No complaints. All right, let's round this out with some segments this week in Theat and Hugs. But before we do that, a quick message from the Barn Burner Podcast Network. All right, this week in Theat. This week in theater in 2008, Steph Curry dropped 27 points and 10 assists in the Garden, defeating West Virginia when he was at Davidson. Steph Curry, man, electric at Davidson. Obviously, this really goes without saying. But I was looking at his uniform that day. You could have fit 15 Steph Currys in there. He was drowning in that thing. How many do you think he would have had if he was playing in a uniform that fit him?
I mean, do you remember those shorts? Maybe we should tweet this out. I'll give you permission to tweet this out. Remember those extra large college basketball shorts that I had that I think everyone wore our freshman, sophomore year, junior year?
I still got them, baby.
I still got them too. I put them on the other day, and they're a dress. They're ridiculous. And Steph was wearing those shorts that night. I know that my performance just around the house doing dishes, laundry, it hinders me. And that's just mundane activities. I can only imagine the wind resistance you're getting as you're coming down the court when you have balloon pants on and a sail, so to speak, on your legs.
Or just for someone as mobile as Steph, just getting grabbed. There's so much jersey to grab. That'd be easy as hell if I was a defender. I don't know. That actually speaks to how great Steph Curry actually was and is. Then, of course, he went on to just destroy the Garden in his professional career as well. I think he dropped 54 back in 2013.
Yeah, that was his. In a game that they lost too.
Yeah.
Let me mention one more thing before we give some hugs. Speaking of teams that suck, Syracuse sucks this year too.
Oh yeah, they're terrible. I feel like Boeheim's just completely given up.
Yeah, speaking of teams that have given up, so sorry for tossing that in there. But it's weird that this is probably the worst Syracuse team and worst North Carolina team we've seen in the last 20 years, and they're both happening at the same time.
Right. Well, so the difference between Syracuse and Providence, for my money, is that I feel like Boeheim's just completely given up. I feel like the roles have been reversed. Boeheim just doesn't get. He's 90 years old, man. He's probably asleep. Literally, this is going to be in poor taste. Might be asleep at the wheel. But Boeheim doesn't care. His players, I feel, do. Providence, I feel like Cooley gives a shit. He's still wearing 3-piece suits. He's still trying to make a statement, and his players don't. So, yeah, sad times for Carolina, Syracuse, and Providence. Carolina is probably going to turn it around and be okay, maybe. Mm-hmm. Here's what I'll say. Of those three teams, they're the one that I have the most confidence in having a decent season or salvaging the season. Boeheim, I feel like, doesn't give a shit, and Providence doesn't care.
Yeah, no.
100%. Hug time, baby. This is going to be our last hug of the year.
Wow. Well, I'm going to end on a pretty good note, I think, and shout out to you for tossing this one my way. My hug is for Kyla. Excuse me, let me get her name right. Kyla Nelson, Pittsburgh college basketball player. She just returned yesterday or 2 days ago. First return to the court after her recovery from cancer, and she had surgery in October. And ended up practicing a week later, which is crazy. And now has finally made it all the way back to the court. So that's a pretty awesome story, like we talked about a couple times this year with someone like what's the guy from Texas?
Andrew Jones.
Andrew Jones, yeah. Andrew Jones, kind of similar situation. So hug for Kyla. And pretty awesome story. I guess Holly Rowe from ESPN surprised her before the game, who's also a cancer survivor. So great little story there before the holidays or leading into the holiday season.
Wonderful hug there. My hug is actually going to be twofold. First of all, it's going to be to Gonzaga because they're going to get revenge on North Carolina tonight. That while we're recording this, it's before the game, but I think they're going to beat the absolute bag out of North Carolina in Spokane and get revenge on what happened in the title game a couple of years ago. And then also my hug is to John Rothstein, because he's the most generous person of all time. All right. I've probably given Rothstein the most hugs during this program's history than anyone else. But apparently there has been a report. I forget who. I'm not attributing it properly, so I apologize. But there's like some report that Rothstein says or texts good luck to like almost every major Division I college basketball coach before they play a game. Like there's photos of a text thread between him and Fran McCaffrey where he just says good luck, good luck, good luck. And they're spaced out by 3 to 5 days, which is when they play games. Fran McCaffrey, to nobody's surprise, hasn't responded. He probably doesn't even respond to his own players, let alone John Rothstein. But Rothstein saying good luck to everyone is just such an absurd and outrageous move that you can't help but love it. And I just want to know where he finds the time. And I had tweeted that. I was like, where the hell does Rothstein find the time between watching the games, reporting, tweeting what he tweets, and then avid follower and friend of the program, Jimmy McGinnis, had a great point. He said he sleeps in May.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that's true. So, John, thank you for being so generous. And to all the theater goers, thank you for listening. We wish you a very Merry Christmas and a happy holidays. This will be our last program before we come back next year. Enjoy the games this upcoming weekend and have a great holiday season. Thank you.